Okay, so welcome everyone. Please keep yourself muted. Linda, you might want to mute. Hear a little echo.
Sorry.
No worries. We are recording this program. Please make sure to visit our YouTube channel. And when you do, hit the subscribe button and smash that like button and click the bell to get all our new content. That really helps us out. So welcome to another educational and inspiring AAM workshop. This workshop is entitled Thinking Like an Animal. In this workshop, you will step deeper into a relationship with yourself, animals, and those around you. Learn to live powerfully in the present moment. Transform your gifts of deep compassion and sensitivity toward animals into a powerful force for change. And you'll learn how to illuminate hearts and successfully dialogue with people who have different beliefs, including specific tools for animal advocates. And in a world of chaos, learn to sustain your courage and resilience. So my name is Michelle Granberg, and I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, and I've been a vegan and activist for 6 years. AAM's mission is to eradicate violence and build a culture of empathy and compassion, which ultimately results in animal liberation. We strive to build a global community of activists through our free 3-month mentorship program that pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we intend to generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events. AAM is proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farmed Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. If you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee, or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight. A passionate animal advocate, educator, and author, Dr. Linda Bender earned a doctorate in veterinary medicine. During the 14 years she spent living in England, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, Linda's veterinary work included the rescue, rehabilitation, and protection of wildlife, often in remote areas. Working with zoos in Southeast Asia, she treated animals rescued from the wildlife trafficking trade and helped reintroduce them back into their natural habitats. Among those given a second chance at life were clouded leopards, tigers, orangutans, and numerous species of rare birds. Working in the field with rarely encountered wildlife, Dr. Bender helped to develop treatment protocols. All of these experiences helped shape Dr. Bender's environmental consciousness and deepened her commitment to spirituality, conservation, and animal advocacy. Dr. Bender started one of the first pet therapy programs in Cincinnati as part of their state mental health program. She is co-founder of the nonprofit charity From the Heart and the author of the Amazon bestseller Animal Wisdom, Learning from the Spiritual Lives of Animals. Okay, so we'll open up for Q&A after Linda's presentation. So please hold your questions until then. And Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very kind, your introduction. Well, I'd like to begin, as I do, with a poem by one of my favorite people in the world who does what I believe in this life is one of the most important things to do in this world in order to create change, and that is share love. So I'd like to share with you To Learn from Animal Being. If you could just take a breath and close your eyes. Beautiful poem written by John O'Donohue, if many of you may be familiar with his work. Take a breath and just simply listen. To learn from animal being. nearer to the earth's heart, deeper within its silence. Animals know this world in a way we never will. We who are ever distanced and distracted by the parade of bright windows that thought opens, their seamless presence is not fractured thus. Stranded between time gone and time emerging, we manage seldom to be where we are, whereas they are always looking out from the here and now. May we learn to return and rest in the beauty of animal being. Learn to lean low, leave our locked minds, and with freed senses, feel the earth breathing within us. May we enter into lightness of spirit and slip frequently into the feel of the wild. Let the clear silence of our animal being cleanse our hearts of corrosive words. May we learn to walk upon the earth with all their confidence and clear-eyed stillness, so that our minds might be baptized in the name of the wind and the light and the rain. Thank you. So that poem by the wonderful John O'Donohue, if you're not familiar with his work, I highly recommend it, sums up basically what I believe to be the teachings we all should live in order to be more loving beings, to teach, to be better advocates, to get along not only with our animal friends, but with our human friends. Because unless we work together with the human community to create the change, we're lost. And I have learned through a lifetime of animal advocacy that is only through the wisdom of our hearts that we make a difference. So thank you for listening to that. And I'll start with a story from my childhood. I was imprinted by the little birds in my backyard growing up in Livingston, New Jersey. And I was much more successful out in the wild with the birds and the critters than I was inside the house with the humans. And they taught me my first lessons of being in nature meant tuning in to a divine consciousness, something that was far greater than my little life, my world, and the 3D world I was in. There were no words for it. We didn't need words, but I was deeply connected to those creatures in nature, and they taught me deep, deep love, and that I was lovable just as I was, this skinny, scrawny little thing. And I'll share a story of when I was about, I guess I was no more than 7, but my father got me. He was my great advocate, and he understood my deep connection and love for animals, and how when I would drag everything home, I would try to heal it, and he would be shocked because often I did. And he came to me one day and said, Linda, I'm so excited. I'm going to take you to see the wild animals. There's a zoo. We're going to go see wild animals. I was beside myself. I could barely contain what was going to happen and the excitement I would feel. So the day came, and I remember walking toward this place somewhere in northern New Jersey, and my dad was holding my hand, and I was clutching so tightly with excitement. And we walked closer and closer to this area. And in this clearing was, before my eyes, getting closer and closer, a giant cage, I guess you would call it, maybe 10 feet by 6 feet. And we went closer and closer, and I focused on what is in there, what is in there. And I saw then the outline of a beautiful black panther, and it was pacing. And suddenly my joy and excitement turned to horror and fear and panic. I was pulled into the feelings of this gorgeous creature who was pacing back and forth, upset. I felt it all. I felt the hurt, the fear, the pain, the anguish. And I started screaming to my father, and we got closer and closer. It was worse. And I went, Daddy, Daddy, she wants to be free. We've got to get her out. My poor dad didn't know what was happening. And I realized at that moment, we had to leave, of course. We immediately left. I was in tears and distraught. But I realized at that point that I needed to help animals. I knew that I was here in this life to help be a voice for animals. And I talk a lot about, when I teach people, about having direct experiences, because we can talk and teach and tell people what to think, what to feel, what it's like for this and that. But unless people directly experience, they're not really, really taking it in. So I've spent my work trying to do that, giving people direct experience of loving animals, being around animals, understanding who they are as souls. You know, the root word for animal is anima, and that means soul. And what I learned as a kid is that all life is soul. There is no better, lesser, smarter, not smart. We're all just in this soup of interconnectedness. A friend of mine's son, who just wrote a book about trees and fungi, said life is a bottomless pit of interconnected relationships. And one of my core messages that I teach people, the core messages from animals, all animals I've connected with, the most important thing in my experience that animals want us to know is that although we think we have multiple problems, as of course we do, the biggest problem that we have is that we humans think that we are separate from the rest of the natural world. We are the only species to secede from the natural world. Loneliness, fear, depression, all the problems we have are a direct result of this. So what then do we do? We know we're getting over the fact that we think we're better than all other species of life. I write about in my book, Animal Wisdom, about species-specific genius. You know, we're not at the top of the pile when it comes to being better than other life forms. We can't fly like the birds. We can't smell or hear like dogs can. We have no echolocation like elephants and so many of the wild ones do. Flatworms, for heaven's sake. They can be cut into pieces and still survive and grow new body parts. Wild cats run faster. So we need to become more humble in who we are as human beings. So I put together all the things that animals teach us, because when we learn from them on all these different levels, we not only become better as individuals, we become better as teachers of other people. Many of the people that I work with and have known and are my mentors and beloved friends over the years in the animal community are empaths. And there's been a lot of talk recently about what it means to be an empath. There are different kinds of empaths, but what we've always been taught is that highly sensitive people, oh, this is not good. Get over yourself, toughen up. You know, this is not correct. When I realized that being a sensitive, intuitive empath, emotional empath, taking on all the pain and suffering and the understanding the emotions of animals is my greatest strength. Not to say I didn't go down and want to end my life many times when I was living overseas and treating animals and seeing the worst cruelty you could imagine. But it's about standing up, learning how to deal with those sensitivities, to make them your courage, because we have the wisdom that needs to be put out in the world today. Empowered wisdom from empaths is the new way to change hearts, to change mind. It's the new way to be the most powerful advocate. We can talk about that later if you want, but moving on. Unconditional love, compassion, we know these things, oneness, beauty and joy, healing, all these things that animals help us with and teach us, including increasing our intuition, helping us with our telepathy, present moment awareness, our spirituality, and what they teach us about death and dying. You know, in the wild, I know you said you haven't had too many people talk about experiences in the wild. If you are in Africa or wherever in around wildlife, you really, really experience, not just learn, but you experience what it's like to be part of that interconnectedness, you know, and you see these qualities of love, oneness, beauty, joy, healing, telepathy, all these things right in front of you playing out. Tigers defending their young, prepared to die to protect them. Even a bee, when it stings you, it's committing suicide. And when they sting, it's most often done for the survival of the group. Termites, if you've ever traveled in Africa and seen the enormous mounds that they build, and they're blind. How do they do this? How do they use these special talents that we all possess? Telepathy, intuition, all these things, these awarenesses that have gone dormant in us. They teach us to reopen them. And of course, dogs. We know how many dog stories there are about dogs who lay down their lives for humans. Just recently, I want to share this because as a veterinarian, there was always a joke about, you know, we get to know families in a small animal clinic, which I did for a while, worked as a small animal vet. You know, we get to know people, we get to know families, and we hear when family members are dying, tragedies. And when a beloved companion animal dies, we see stronger grief. We see more breakdowns. It's just kind of what we see. So what is it that's so obviously it's beyond words. There was a woman, I was out walking my little dog Luna the other day, and a woman was driving by on a little golf cart, and she stopped to speak to me, and she said, I just need to talk. My dog was put to sleep last week, and I'm just riddled with grief. I cannot believe it. My husband died 4 years ago, and I loved him dearly. But this grief that I feel at losing this dog that was so dear to me is like something I've never felt before. So let's examine how we use the depth of love to go forward in our lives, to be courageous human beings, to do the work we need to do, particularly in the insane world that we live in right now. We know healing well. We know how PTSD people are so helped by veterans, by kids. You know, I personally was involved in some of that kids being offered animals after school shootings, and how they were completely closed up, and only the company of an animal, a dog, pulled them out where they could even speak again. You know, intuition. We need intuition in this world to be good advocates. Seismologists still deny that there's a way to predict earthquakes. We know, who've lived and seen and worked overseas, elephants teach how they're coming. In 1997, in the Assisi earthquake, days before the earthquake came, dogs were howling, rats came out of holes. People were complaining at restaurants because people would sit in their restaurants and rats would be running around. It was a terrible problem. And then a few days later, the earthquakes hit. I think we need some kind of an animal-based warning system. If anybody out there has some ideas about that, we could save a lot of lives. I'd like to talk to you about telepathy, because these telepathic muscles we all share as animals are really dormant. Animals can help us. we talk about morphic fields, if you know, if you've read anything about that. Schools of fish, packs of wolves, starlings, murmurings. Nobody can explain. The latest research at Princeton University finally concluded, sorry, but we just cannot solve the mystery of starling murmurings. We just don't know how they do it. As far as telepathic communication, there is an African gray parrot that I've come to know and is being studied now very quietly. But they are particularly, African grays are particularly great at picking up vocabulary and speaking. This particular bird, the first time I met this bird, friends of the owner, and she said, Linda's coming. And so he knew I was coming. And to prove that this animal, there's so much more to telepathy than most people understand beyond normal sensory cues. I walked in, it was about 4 p.m, and the bird announced hello and all that, and proceeded then to tell me what I'd had for lunch, exactly what I had for lunch 3 hours earlier. So why am I talking about this? Why is this so important? It is so important because by sharing these experiences, by bringing this research out into the public, interspecies communication is a new thing that's beginning to be studied finally in universities. I just participated in a whole program about this from the University of in Canada, a big university in Canada. That's how we teach. This is how we learn. We get beyond the skeptics who say animals are nothing. And dogs who know when their owners are coming home. Really? I find all the time that people don't talk about this, but when they get hold of me, they say, I can't talk about this with anybody else, but I can tell you. And then they share all these wonderful experiences of telepathic experiences with their animals. What is the bond? What is the key? Once again, what is the key? The key to all of this is unlocking our hearts. This is very simple. We've all heard it, but we have to experience it, know it, teach it, and create an empowerment using this heart. The key that makes animal telepathy work with humans is, and it's been studied and proven, it's the close emotional bond. So why does your dog know that you're coming home? Your dog knows when you're coming home, when you have the intent, when you set the intention to come home. Why does that happen? Because you have an emotional bond. We know telephone telepathy with people is quite well known. I had an experience with my daughter. The only telepathic experience I can really say for sure I had with a human being was my daughter. She was flying to London recently, and it was about 1 o'clock my time in the morning, and I bolted out of a deep sleep. I'm a really good sleeper. I woke up knowing my daughter was in fear that she could possibly die. I had never experienced anything like this. Meanwhile, I couldn't figure it out. I went back to sleep thinking, oh, this must be a bad dream. She called me the next morning from her London flight, and at just about the time when I woke up with this horrible connection or dreaming, whatever I thought it was, she told me that the pilot had come across and they'd been flying for 3 hours. And he suddenly said, we have to go back. There's something wrong with the plane. So she spent the next hour in fear for her life, thinking she was dying. I'll never say anymore that I don't have that telepathic ability with humans as well as animals. So what's our problem? Our mental, this is another very important point for all of us. Our domesticated animals help us reawaken our telepathic skills. Why are we so slow? Our muscles have become atrophied, but our mental chatter gets in the way, the monkey mind. We start to deny our abilities. We listen to the skeptics. We have fear of what other people will think and fear of our own powerlessness. because the materialist view says we don't have to care about animals. The mind is nothing but the activity of the brain. The mind is locked in the brain. There's nothing else. So we don't have to care about nature. We don't have to care about animals. We don't have to care about anything but this odd reason that we humans have a consciousness. Well, we have to teach from what we know and what we experience and help others to experience that this is not true. The abilities are so obvious in other animals that we can help free each other from the old dogmas that have kept us enslaved. As Rumi said, out there beyond, there's a field. I'll meet you there beyond time and space. We can go there using our minds. We are not limited. We also to remind people that the science, and I'm a scientist, I love science, but I understand that science is a method of inquiry. It is not a dogma. So for any of you who come up with the quote scientific skeptics, it is not a religion, this dogma of science. Science is a method of inquiry, not a dogma. Okay, so I'd like to discuss very briefly spirituality and death that animals have taught me to become part of, which has increased my ability to come out of the mainstream and speak about the powers of understanding a spiritual practice. And one thing I have always taught is, in order to be a successful activist, in order to help animals and become the most powerful activists we can, I find from my own personal life, I couldn't do it without a personal spiritual practice. And what has been shown to me by animals, that there is a divine presence in all of nature. I learned that as a young girl in nature with the robins. And the other thing, just before we conclude this, is they teach us not to be afraid of death, because when you're not afraid of dying, you're not afraid of living, and you're vice versa. So animals don't make such a fuss over it, and they can help us be channels. And really, the more we can help people understand the need for a spiritual, whatever you want to call it, something that is beyond ourselves, we rise to become stronger and better human beings and better teachers of what we know to be true and protectors of all animals. And I believe that whether we realize it on a conscious level or not, human beings benefit from animals in so many ways. This is the reason we keep companion animals, why we watch wildlife, why we feel elated when we hear the songs of birds. To me, hearing the sound of a bird is the voice of divine consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. Why we keep pets, why we hang out with horses. We are in a miraculous unity with all life. So I want to stop there and briefly mention about being an activist. And if any of you out there are, you can take little online cues and questionnaires about whether or not you're an empath, because a lot of empaths are in fear and feel it's a weakness. But there are ways to flip that around, as I said earlier, because empaths have the greatest ability to speak from their hearts and really make a difference in influencing people. And in that vein, I've had the wonderful luck to know Jane Goodall. And one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard in my life, and why I admire this woman beyond pretty much anybody I know in the field. Back in the day when she came to the United States, and she went, I believe she was in New York, correct me if you're wrong, but we'll just say it was New York. And she went to actually visit some of these facilities where they're doing the testing and the research using chimps. And she actually went wild with rage. She was just beside herself. You can imagine what she was feeling. What did she do? How did she respond to this horrific thing that was happening to these creatures that she so loved? She said to them, this is a slight variation, but basically what she said to these people, she gathered them together, the people who were doing this research, torturing these little beings. She said, you are all highly intelligent people. And you know in your heart that what you're doing is wrong and that we can do better. She did not go in and address these people with rage and screaming and telling them they were horrible. And she changed. She created this change that was immensely powerful. And she taught me that the way you teach, the way you change people is not to fight with them, but to work through their hearts, open that heart wisdom. That is the most powerful way to create change in the world. So all of these things I've been talking about are ways to get us to a place where we can behave like Jane did and know the power of that kind of conversation. I've often said, you can quote me, lapel grabbing is not an effective form of conflict resolution. Trust me, I've been there. I've tried it. It doesn't work. So at that point, I would we can pause here. There's some things I wanted to go over about specifically improving our relationships, but we could pause here if you'd like, or as you would.
You mean you want to take some questions right now?
How's our time going?
We're good with time. We got plenty of time. If you want to keep.
Yeah, then I'd just like to go back again. And I put together these for people, specific ways to improve our relationships, all our relationships, right? All our relationships with our animal friends, interspecies communication, communication with all life, because we're all interconnected. People have, over the years, have wanted me to get so specific. How do I talk to my dog? Or how do I get my dog to talk to me? Or this sort of thing. And I listen and I say, okay, well, I can help you open up communication, first of all, with yourself, and then expand it out to all beings, because every one of us are animal communicators. I can't do anything more than you can do. It's just maybe I've been doing it longer, and I don't diss myself. I believe that what I am knowing is real because I've experienced it. And I see a dog popping up there. So number one, I'll just go quickly through these 12 things that I put together. Our biggest block to doing anything is our mind. So unless we can do the first thing, which is open our mind to the possibility that we are far more powerful than we've been brainwashed into thinking. I'm sure all of you out there know we've been brainwashed since childhood to be diminished 3D people who anything outside of that is fake. Well, let me just say, if you come across people like that, say, you know something? We happen to know that our hearts are beating, correct? But nobody in science can tell us what makes the human heart begin to beat. Nobody knows, particularly since it starts beating before the brain is fully developed. Okay? But we're not denying that our hearts are beating. Okay? Let's qualify. I think about dogs, and there are no skeptics in the dog community, right? Can you imagine one dog going up to another dog and saying, hey, buddy, how do you know that you know when your owner's coming home? How do you know? Be skeptical. No, they don't do that. They know the truth of what they know and who they are. So the first thing we have to do is unblock our minds to all these possibilities, not only to who we are and what we can be, but the powerful ways that we can help animals. We really can make a difference. We can break through our resistance, letting go of every layer. Okay, next is watch your thoughts. This goes along with number one, but you'll find that whatever you do, whatever you, particularly if it's outside of the box and you're doing something new and you're trying and you're hoping for the best, your mind chatter is going to shut you down. It's going to distract you from going deeper. It's going to cling you back into the fear-based, oh my God, I can't do this now. Other things going on. What will people think? I'll never be able to do it. I'm not strong enough. I'm not a good enough activist. Jane Goodall is better. I'll never be good. Blah, blah, blah. The fear-based thinking. Watch your thoughts. Watch your thoughts. I think too, one of my favorite people was Oscar Wilde. He died in 1900, the Irish poet and playwright. The quote I love by Oscar Wilde is, "I was distracted by the distraction from the distraction." So we humans spend our lives in these distracted states, not being able to really focus and get done what we want to do. And again, here we go. Expand your heart awareness. And I'd like to give you a simple way to help you if you're feeling down or stressed or you're in a conflict situation, if you can get 5 minutes. So if you would do this with me. So I won't make it 5 minutes because we want to move along, but it's a 5-minute technique, meditation, whatever you want to call it. So you can do this anywhere, anytime, expanding your heart. So simple way, tap in. So close your eyes. Close your eyes, just take a few simple breaths in and out. Now, what I want you to do is bring your mind to something that you love. Visualize right in front of you, if you can, if you're good at visualizing. See it, feel it. It could be a beloved animal companion. It could be your dog. It could be, oh gosh, anything that brings you a sudden immense feeling of joy and happiness. It could be a sunset, being by the ocean, whatever it is. Put your mind on that and simply feel that love. Just feel what that awareness is doing and how it's affecting your heart. Just allow yourself to wash yourself in that love. And just stay with that for just a minute with your eyes closed. Over time and beyond. Now come back. You can do this exercise anytime, and it will pull you into a place where you can use it for whatever advantages you wish. You can center yourself after a horrible encounter with a toxic person or an argument about animal rights, whatever. You can use this to sit with your furry friend and feel the love and communicate more deeply with that loving companion. Or watching birds outside. It will deepen your connection. It will deepen your knowledge. It will bring you to a deeper perspective and actually a higher consciousness where you need to be in this crazy world. Listen with your heart. tune in, feel the love and joy of this experience, and utilize that as a powerful force in whatever you are doing. Next is to practice presence, utilizing the techniques from above. You're now in, when you're in this state, you're in present moment awareness. And what is present moment? Present moment is the only time anything ever happens in this world. And that's where non-human species spend their lives and spend all their time. It's being, not doing. It's not trying. And here you are able to come up with your next plan, your greatest creative moments. This will aid you in anything you are doing in your life. Sit in the stillness and listen. We know that intuitive experiences is linked to an emotional bond with animals and to your own heart. Next is to practice stillness in nature. Sit, walk quietly. I think we've all heard this, but notice all the life forms around you, on the ground, in the sky. Have a childlike wonder with no labeling. Krishnamurti, who was a great Indian teacher, used to say, when you take a child into nature, if you teach them the name of a bird, they will never see the bird again the same way. Forget labels. Experience yourself as in nature with one soul being to another. This will increase your intuitive skills, increase your telepathic skills, increasing your oneness. And how does this serve you in the world of reaching out and in animal advocacy? You will get an intuitive head more clearly with the people you come in contact with. You will telepathically be able to read situations, okay? You will read needs and intentions. It will make you much more powerful. Remember that childlike wonder in nature. And I think that's probably about enough for right now. We can take a pause here. Oh, and the other thing I like to say is thinking of spiritual growth and in spiritual enlightenment. You know, meditation is a powerful practice that I use and I recommend everyone to do because it allows us to get outside the craziness of the world. It helps us heal. It helps us be stronger, better on all levels. So I I forgot to mention how simple is that, the meditation. But remember that the Buddha did not attain enlightenment by getting a PhD in spiritual practices or the best ways to be an advocate. No, he awakened with the help of animals and nature under a tree. So thank you.
Nice, Linda. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we're just getting started here. So does anybody have any questions? Or anything you would like Linda to explore and go a little deeper into? If you do, raise your hand or put the questions in the chat. Did someone unmute? Does someone have a question?
Yes, that's me. I missed the start of this. I'm in Australia and there was a few mix-ups with Facebook and time zones and stuff. Is the thing going to be available on Dr. Bender's website or somewhere, the recording?
The recording will, I don't know if she may put it on her website. She's welcome to, but it will be on Animal Activism Mentorship's YouTube channel. It will be uploaded there in the next 48 hours or so. And so if you want to find that, just go on YouTube and simply search for Animal Activism Mentorship, and you'll see all our previous workshops and Dr. Bender's workshop there as well. What is your name?
So my name's Gay. I haven't got a picture there on my being in the meeting. So that was Animal Activism. What was the last word, please?
Mentorship.
Mentorship.
Yeah,
and
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to ask, where are you in Australia? Because my daughter lives in Sydney.
I'm halfway between Sydney and Brisbane on the east coast in a place called Coffs Harbour.
Oh, okay. Well, I love being there. It's one of my favorite places. Love it.
It's spring here, and at the moment I've got 2 breeding pairs, one of magpies and one of butcherbirds, and another few crested pigeons. And they're coming to me, and it's just such a joy. And it's I talk to them, but maybe they're reading my thoughts as well.
Oh, and they will, and they will.
Yeah.
Oh, bless you. Thank you for helping the birds. There's such a need now.
Thank you. I'm going to mute again now.
Thank you, Gay, very much for your contributions there. We do have a question from John Bell in the chat, Linda, which is, do we know which animals have best telepathic senses?
Oh, best. Well, again, species-specific genius. All animals have their special ways of, but they all do, they all do. And frankly, I can't say what is the best because there's so much that we don't know. I've really been impressed with my personal experiences. If I have to, well, 2. Oh boy, I'll pick 2 because I'll talk about being in the wild. And I would say probably the most spine-chilling, overwhelming, overcoming experiences I've had with an animal would be the elephants out in the wild. And I've done this many times, and both animals out in the wild and animals who were rescued and raised and then rewilded. I would have to say, to be in the presence of a wild elephant is to be in the presence of an overwhelming and great soul. And elephants just read your heart. They read your heart. And it's almost beyond what I can describe, but it's brought me to tears. They completely read you. And I would have to say elephants would be number 1. And number 2, or one-on-one, would be the wild white lions I worked with in Timbuktu in South Africa. To be in the presence of those white lions is one of the most incredible experiences I've had. And these experiences are so powerful, and the energy in these areas, it's just different. And I've always dread leaving because it's always such a downer when I leave, because the energy changes. It's a lighter, it's just a whole other consciousness that permeates me when I'm in the presence of these animals. I hope that's helpful.
Sorry. Yeah, and he was also, asking about maybe cats versus dogs.
Oh,
I doubt they're probably the same. And I'm thinking, you talked about, the bond, the emotional bond being sort of the key to why we read each other's thoughts. Our companion animals is some of it, that emotional bond, plus just sharing the space together, the fact that we're under the same roof for so many years. Have they said that also contributes to that telepathic dynamic that happens between us and our companions?
Again, animals tend to be more telepathic. And if you want to say other psi qualities like premonitions, senses of being stared at, all these different psychic phenomena, they just tend to be more in animals than in humans. Why? Because we've let our abilities atrophy, not because we're so crummy at it, but we're crummy at it now, And we're even more so because we're so dependent on our phones. So we're shut down. But I think dogs and cats are very different. The bond is so deep. For example, if you have a cat that's on you, on your chest here, if you're lying in bed or whatever, and the cat comes here and starts purring at you, your immune system, as you may know, your tests have shown that your immune system just skyrockets. You become there are deep levels of connection here with these domesticated animals. And in dogs, tests have shown that being around a dog that's panting is one of the most crazy, but one of the most calming things a person can do. Completely calms people. Now these, this goes back, what, thousands of years? I don't know. But the tests have shown that, and it's been proven, it's not just an idea, it's been proven that when does an animal go to the door? When does an animal perk up and know that the owner is coming home? When you in your mind has set the intention to come home, not when you're within 100 yards, not when you're at the door, not when you're down the street. It's when you set the intention, and it's been proven by very, actually simple tests, but it is the truth. What I like to say about cats, I think, and the stories, this is true. Studies have been done about cats knowing when they're going to be taken to the vet, which is near and dear to my heart. They know, they disappear. Nobody said anything. How do they know? But they know. There was a study done in England, and there was like about 65 vet clinics that were called, and they said, do you have trouble with your clients coming in for appointments, bringing cats? And most of them all said yes, except there were two who responded by saying, we have so many no-shows with cats that we stopped making appointments. It's true. But what cracks me up about cats is, again, there is a deep emotional bond, no doubt. But does your cat know what's going on with you? Yes. Does your cat maybe sometimes not care so much? Yes. But dogs tend to be much more in the pleaser mode, which I find, delightful. But it is definitely that emotional bond that creates that whole explosion of telepathy.
Wonderful. There's so much there. So there's a question from Deborah. I don't know if you can answer, but we'll see. Can you discuss what happened between Lawrence Anthony and the elephants he rescued and provided sanctuary and love and respect for? I've always been touched by the story of how the herd he rescued knew that Lawrence Anthony had left his body and made their way to his home across many miles. I don't know this story. It sounds fascinating. And stayed there to pay homage to the man they loved.
Yes, I'm familiar with this, and it gives me chills and brings tears to my eyes, because this is an example of how deeply elephants are capable of love and that bond. Elephants have so much to teach human beings about what it means to be a loving creature, about what it means to have integrity. I mean, these are things I've seen in elephant families run by the matriarch. The matriarch can be a tough taskmaster, but she keeps her critters in line, and that love and wisdom is what is so astonishing. And in that situation, they know. I could tell you stories of animals or elephants that were rescued out and brought in and saved and nurtured, because elephants, you don't just heal them and send them back out in the wild. It takes years for them to be able to be independent, and they must never be alone. They thrive in loving bonds, and they will create loving bonds with each other as elephants, but they create tremendously deep loving bonds with their keepers. And so in the case that we're mentioning here, this is what happened. There was this very, very deep loving bond. Those elephants know exactly what's going on. They read the hearts, correct? And they go beyond this physical life. So they know when other animals they love. Talk about the love bond. This is a perfect example. They know what's happened. They have premonitions. They know. they went back to honor this person that they loved and who loved them and basically rescued them. This is a beautiful example of the wisdom of non-human beings, and so deeply shown with this situation with these elephants. They came back to honor this person. They never forget love. Stories of how elephants have been raised by their human keepers, and then they finally are, encouraged to go back in the wild, and they do. There's a wonderful story, I think I mentioned it in my book, of an elephant coming back, as they do. They come back and visit. They'll be out in the wild, but they'll come back and they'll bring new family members. They'll bring their new babies, their baby elephants, to show their human friends. It's so wonderfully touching. And the story of one instance where an old keeper was visiting a facility after not being there for many years, and he was wandering around, and all of a sudden several elephants were flapping their ears and trunks flying, and one elephant came charging, just charging and screaming toward this one man. And everyone was at first really, wondering, oh my God, what's going on here? The elephant greeting was for this one particular man who they found out had been her keeper 30 years prior. 30 years. An elephant never forgets, and what they never forget is love.
Yeah, there's a reason that we've always heard that, right? And the reason, but I've never heard that, right? And the reason is love. So John was saying in the chat about, some people say animals have no souls. But of course, probably we all here absolutely know from our connecting with animals that they do. But maybe what would you say, because we do a lot of outreach, and sometimes I do hear that from people. Animals they're vacant. They don't have a soul. And, there's no way to measure the soul per se, but what would you say to someone who used that as sort of a pushback to why they think they can eat animals or be cruel to animals, that they don't have a soul? What would you say?
Well, when people who work and do research around pigs, and when all, in that business of putting together formulas, and, we as vets are trained to do all that stuff, but the people who work around the pigs, and they're so highly intelligent and emotional creatures, but they were never allowed to give names to the pigs. Right. They were referred to by numbers, because they didn't want people to have an emotional attachment. So there was they created this, well, it's distant. They're not like us. They're different than us. They have no soul. They have no feelings. They this, they that, and the other thing. I still have heard, hard to believe, but I've still heard people talk about it's okay to research on animals because they don't have feelings anyway. They don't feel pain. I'm thinking, are we still saying that animals don't have pain? Can you imagine? So we see these things, we hear these things, and they can be addressed without screaming and yelling and lapel grabbing, but we have to reach into that person's heart, right? And for instance, well, how do we know? How do you know that? We don't know that. And how we address those situations when they come up is where we are, what consciousness we are firmly planted in, because we can plant seeds. We can give people another suggestion, if nothing else, that all life is soul. And another thing is, this is fairly recent that we have been turned around into thinking that only humans have souls, because throughout history, all right, it was understood that all life was soul. This has not always been the case, but we have been deluded into this thinking by, the dogmatic materialist scientist community, by some religious groups, and certainly, corporatocracy, and people in the food and animal industry. They want us to stay in that outdated dogma. It's not, how do we finally get through to people? By opening their hearts. And this is our challenge, for those of us who do this work, and it's tough.
Yeah, it's not easy.
But I know I also can tell you that I have a database filled with stories of people who, it's unexplained powers of animals, and people send in all their unexplained stories, animal stories, whatever. And I would say that at least 70% of those stories involve animals who have crossed over, and they're coming back and in some fashion communicating with their loved ones, their owners. So we know that they're just like we are. They're more prepared as soul beings than we are. They get it more so than we. But I know for a fact, I had an experience, I tell the story in my book, about my father contacting me through a blue jay after he had passed. We are all in a soup of souls. I also don't believe, I have never experienced the fact that in certain traditions, well, in India, often they say, well, if you've been bad in this life, you'll come back as a lowly animal. I don't believe that's true. That's definitely not true. And I don't know a person who's come back as an animal, or an animal who's become a person. It's just not been my personal experience. But we are all soul. All life is soul.
Yeah, I love that. So does, if anybody else, it's still questions or welcoming questions, if you want to place them in the chat. So a question from Deborah. Yeah, I was going to ask the same kind of question, Deborah, like, I mean, how do we open people's hearts? I mean, it sounds sort of, like there's no like crowbar to open people's hearts, how do we get people to see and feel what we see and feel? And obviously it's through building rapport and conversations, but also, Linda, like, so what would be a tool for that? Plus, would you say that people who abuse animals their hearts are closed? I mean, obviously it's so much more than that. It's more, that's a simple way of saying it, but would you say that their hearts are closed? Maybe they're also damaged or traumatized, and they come from violence, and so they continue and perpetuate that cycle, although it's much more than that. But Deborah says, I've tried to help people who love their dogs and cats to make the connection. Many of us here tonight, I'm sure we've tried to help people make the connection to other animals, and speciesism through connecting it to dogs and cats, that all animals feel joy, love, fear, grief, all the range of emotions. And I've tried, she says, and some listen and some ignore, and it hurts. And, she asks, how would you feel if I ate your loved one? And we do try to make that comparison to people that we outreach with.
Yes.
And most of the time, it still doesn't strike them. They still don't make the connection, right? Because that cognitive dissonance. But what would you say to that?
Well, I agree that anybody who would hurt an animal, or, their hearts are closed. Now, there are reasons that people have closed hearts. We could have a whole other, talk on that. But people who hurt animals and people who hurt others have been hurt. So by simply telling them they're wrong and preaching, all that happens is you get a shutdown. So let's go back to that example with Jane Goodall. Okay. How did she handle that situation? Because what she wanted was the good for the chimps. And they were, the horrors that were going on there was, beyond what I'm going to describe here. But again, it's experience. How do you open someone's heart? You can begin with a conversation. You can tweak ideas that might create some form of compassion. Okay. Compassion is the start. How do you do that? You could take someone out in nature. You could take someone for a walk. You could tell them to listen to the song of the bird. You can just do simple little things to try to slightly create openings in their hearts. But if you preach, I've been doing this for more years than I want to talk about. It has never worked. I was on an airplane. I'll give you an example. I was on an airplane once traveling, and this man was a researcher actually. And we began talking, as you do, about what we do and blah, blah, blah. And I told him I was a vet and animal, I worked with animals around the world. And he immediately got his back up and thought, uh-oh, we're going to have a tiff here. And he looked at me with this sort of obnoxious look on his face and said, oh, so you must be one of those Greenpeace advocates. And I tried to muster up all my courage and strength and fortitude. And I said, well, I'm not actually a member of Greenpeace. I believe in what they're doing and I support them. But isn't it a shame that we need people like that? And he started talking about the experiments he was doing to animals in the lab. And he said, yeah, well, I mean, you know, they come in and they bother us, and we now have all these regulations and forms we have to fill out to make sure we're not, you know, being cruel to the animals. And he said, well, what do you think of that? And I said, I think it's a terrible, terrible shame that we need to enforce those rules, that people don't know that from within their own hearts to be kind to animals. And what happened is he just ran out of arguments. He didn't have a comeback for that one. And I know, although he didn't come around and say, okay, I agree, I know it touched a chord in his heart. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah,
I hope that is in some way.
I find that helpful. If other folks find that helpful, you can put in the chat what about that really resonates for you. And I have a question again, since sort of we're in the realm of talking about from the research and from your experience, you know, animals' relationship to suffering and animals' relationship to death and dying being two different things. When they know they're dying, do they know they're dying? The answer is yes, but how does that show up? And then versus death itself, and the afterlife. And I mean, I would imagine, of course, no animal wants to suffer, and they move in the direction of pleasure and
Right.
away from pain. All animals, of course, and they're not, you know, I don't know that they have fear of death per se. What would you say about that? But I also know that they're not in a rush to die either.
No, and I think we have to be really, really careful that we blow off.
Anthropomorphize either.
Yeah.
That's the word that you anthropomorphize. You don't want to do that.
We don't want to
Explain
do
what that is too.
Well, it's we look at an animal and we ascribe to that animal everything that we are. Well, no, you know, we're interconnected and we're, you know, bonded and all that sort of thing, but they're not just like us in many ways, in many, many ways. And so we don't want to do that, but we don't want to say, oh, animals are here. What thing that really rings my bell is when people say animals are here to take on our diseases and to take on all our suffering, blah, 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 our dogs and cats. I actually heard someone say that once at this is an interesting story, if you let me share it. I went to a conference and there was supposedly a group of animal communicators who were up on this thing I was giving a talk the next day, but I arrived late and caught the end of this sort of group of people claiming they know everything about animals and what animals think and feel. And this one question was, yes, so, I was sick and my dog started acting sick, blah, blah. And the answer was, well, that's their purpose. Their purpose here is to take on our illness. Well, I turned into Jane Goodall, I went, wow, no. So obviously I wasn't part of it. I ended the experience and I left. I went to bed that night and I woke up this never happened to me before, about 3 a.m. I was awakened and these voices were like thundering in my ear. And, it's speaking, but it's not speaking, but it came to me as, tell the people we are not here to take on your diseases. We are not here to take on your problems. We will help you. We love you. We will do anything for you, but our purpose is not to be here to dump your problems and illnesses on us. So I went, okay. I thought, well, who am I supposed to tell? What is this? I went back to sleep. And so I gave my talk, and as I was finishing up my talk, I just said out to the group, I said, I'm not sure who needs to hear this, but I was specifically told last night by these animals that animals are not here to take on our diseases. And I just briefly said, I said, so that goes out, and that's what I've been told to say, and that's what I've said. So I finished and I walked off, and I was surrounded by a group of people who came over to me and said, oh my God, thank you for saying what you just said. We needed to hear. So you explain to me how all that happens, okay? How does that happen? These are great mysteries. Animals understand, they understand death. They don't want to die. We're not, they're not here for us to dump on, but they have strong feelings about the process of dying, death, what happens afterward. Animals live in the present moment. They trust. Even things are terrible in their lives, they still trust life. And I believe that animals in this realm, in our 3D, are much more closely connected to spirit, to divine consciousness. So they kind of get what's going on. So the transition from life to death is not as severe as it is with most of us. And so when their time comes, they're more comfortable with it. But they also know, again, flip it back to helping the humans, they will stick around because we're so afraid of letting go. They will do that. They will stay longer than they could or should because we don't want them to leave. But, they come back, they help us, they heal us. And I've also told people, if you want to contact or connect with your animals who have left you and you're having trouble, because we try so hard that we kind of close it, give an intention before you go to bed. And often in the dream state, you will get a contact or a message or even a vision of your lost pet. But they are more comfortable. They trust life. Therefore, they trust what will happen after life. And due to the stories I hear and my own personal experiences, I know this to be my truth, not what I believe, but it is my truth.
Beautiful, thank you. Any other questions? I have more questions. I want to keep Linda all night. Yeah, John saw his cat Abby in his dream, and she
Yeah.
meowed.
Yeah, it's really a good way to open that connection, because we're so choked up and emotional and trying so hard, often when they cross, that we almost prevent the connection. So if we put that intention before we go to bed, it can really be helpful.
I'm sure when you were working with, in the veterinary practice, working with life and death every day, keeping them alive. And unfortunately, when the time comes, assisting them to pass and being close to that must have been very emotional. And of course, I'm curious how you managed with that. I guess it's because you're doing so much good that moves you through that. But is there any one little story there that was life-changing for you, or really stands out?
Oh gosh. Well, in the wild, or working with wildlife, and again, I tell this story, it was a life-changing moment for me when I lived my worst fear. And I was called, it was almost like a MASH unit. We were working overseas, and we were called to quickly get over to the clinic. There were some birds that were being brought into the clinic that were attempted smuggled. And so raced over there, arrived. It was in my mind, what am I going to do first? Get this ready, get that ready. And I walked in, there was dead silence. And what was awaiting for me was a line of dead birds. There wasn't even a survivor. And I basically lost it. And I lived my worst nightmare. And I realized that it shut me down. I didn't want to live in this world that was so cruel. I couldn't carry on. What was the point? The whole thing. Took me a long time to recover from that. But in retrospect, facing my worst fear, that's how you heal. And I realized that I could be strong enough to rise above, and that this would not stop me from doing what I need to do. And as far as being a veterinarian, I just want to throw this out there. There is now more than ever, veterinarians have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession. Didn't used to be that way, but now it's very much so. And also vet techs. So when people, as they so well-meaning, but they say, wow, I couldn't, I couldn't be a vet. It's too, cruel. It's too heartbreaking. Boy, you guys can handle it so well. Well, no, we don't handle it so well. And as a small animal vet, when I did that, I was given hope and encouraged by people who did come in if their animals were dying, and they were in tears and their hearts were breaking, and they would come in and they would apologize. And I would say, never, ever apologize. Bless you for the love and the wonderfulness of your being. And it's the heartbreaking situations where people dump animals, where they're treated cruelly, but we do the best we can. And for me, it was the situation out with the birds in the wild when I said, this is it. Either I figure out a way to carry on and become a stronger advocate, or I shut down. And I chose, because I had to do what I had to do. And when you're doing your life's work and you're doing this kind of work, boots on the ground, you've got to be strong. You've got to be strong, because to not do what you were put in this world to do is more painful. So you're kind of, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I realized I couldn't do otherwise. I could not do otherwise than carry on doing the work that I believed since childhood I was brought here to do. And that's why I teach what I teach, and empowering ourselves to carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Carla had asked, And this is a tough one to think about. The animals in the slaughterhouses, we've seen footage of them facing their death and being trapped, and we probably put ourselves in their places. It's the most horrific situation. How confused, how utterly confused and dissociated they probably are, and not to anthropomorphize, but just from a visceral level.
Oh,
What are
yeah.
your thoughts about what they're experiencing in order, and it helps us become even more sensitive and advocate better.
Well, remember what we were saying earlier on, animals are better at intuition, at telepathy. They know they're going to their death. They know. And think of the group consciousness. Even in we humans, it's tough right now, and as thick as we are as a species, even we're tuning into the fact that there's a group consciousness of fear and hatred, and right, we're all tuning into that on some level. The more empathic we are, the worse it gets. We have to figure out ways to go beyond that. But the animals are so much even more in tune to what's happening to them and their fates. And you hear stories of a random animal like bolting and escaping or whatever. It happens, but they do know. It's the horrors are the horrors are beyond what probably the people on this call need to know about. One thing I learned about being an empath is often people are, you see the ads on TV, you see animals that are being abused, and it tries to say, help the animals, look how terrible it is. People who are empathic do not need to see that stuff. If you are just an empath, you feel the pain, you don't need to see it. Okay. The people who need to see that stuff are the people who are not feeling. Okay. And it's one way to somehow bring attention to what's going on, that they're not getting it. Everything is a spectrum, and there are people out there who just don't get it. Right. So it's pretty awful.
Yeah.
It's really awful. I mean, I cannot say otherwise, because it's beyond what any being should experience.
Any sentient being. So moving from that and to maybe just a couple more questions, because we will wrap up in a bit, shortly. But Deborah was asking about how we can help animals in slaughterhouses, vivisection labs, factory farms, or the Cove in Taji where dolphins are targeted. How can we help any animal in harm's way? Any sort of thoughts on that? And then I was also wondering, just to tag on to that, are you sort of up to date on what's going on in places like Asia and Africa where poaching and cruelty was so bad? Has it gotten any better in those countries overall, with laws or people's awareness being better than it used to be?
Yeah.
Are you hopeful about those places?
I'll tell you what, I'm very connected with and worked actually for many years with poaching. There are three main, as far as I'm concerned, three main evils in this world. And one is human trafficking, one is animal trafficking, and the other is drug trafficking. And it's real. And I spent time, trying to rescue animals that were, victims of the wildlife trafficking trade. It's about as bad as you can imagine. And I'm not a violent woman, I'm conflict averse. I'm all of this stuff. But I'll tell you, there have been times when if I had got my hands on one of those poachers, I would have thought about it. But I'll give you an example of elephant poaching. It's gone up and down, up and down. I don't know what happened. I just lost my screen. Oh, there you are. But example is education, education, education. So with poaching, you have to stop the need or the demand. You have to stop the demand, you have to educate, and you have to work on the ground, boots on the ground for the actual trafficking, the guys who were poaching, because it's a hierarchy. So what do? You get your people on the ground to try to stop the killing. You educate people, and you stop the need. And one of the ways you stop the need, and this is an example of Prince William in England, became very engaged in stopping poaching, and he gathered, and other people, he was part of it, but many other famous people got together and they went over to China, because that's where the large, don't get me wrong, there's demand from the United States too, but China, massive demand. So they went over there and they educated the people, and they said poaching elephants is bad, it kills elephants. People didn't even know that. They thought these trinkets, that elephants shed their tusks. So that drastically reduced demand. And then also laws have been changed. So these are ways that we have to be activists to get involved and educate people, be boots on the ground and be part of these organizations, and it isn't only elephants, I'm very active in the Audubon Society, in Nature Conservancy, because now more than ever, we have to be really, really careful of our laws that protect wildlife, that protect birds, that, because we're losing so many. In the last, I think I was just reading in the Audubon Society, in the last 50 years, we've lost about 3.5 billion birds, and so many more on the extinction list, and for a multitude of reasons, but we've got to be aware and learn and teach and help out and do all of the above in whatever way we can. And one of the things I didn't get to about, ways to get involved is, serve a cause greater than self, meaning pick something you love, pick an animal. Say with birds, join the Audubon Society, get involved, go to your local chapters and work on creating wild spaces. There's so many things that we can do that make a difference. But poaching, at least for the elephants, has gone down. But we have to consider the other things. One of the biggest reasons we're losing so many of our wild animals in Africa is because they roam. They walk for thousands of miles, and those areas that they live in, their habitats are being destroyed. So it's human invasion, human destruction of habitats that's also immense. So it's so multifactorial, and human animal conflict. And then again, that's part of education. So I could go on about this forever, but I won't. Yeah. But there are wonderful people out there doing great things. And I do, I say my prayers and tremendous thanks for the people who are doing this great work.
That's good to hear. We're going to all keep those people who are helping in our prayers, as well as the animals. Could you say maybe one thing about how you, maybe, because that would be we, manage burnout? To go back to sort of self-care, I guess. Matt, how do we manage burnout with our helpers' burnout, our our compassion fatigue,
Yes,
and secondary trauma?
that's right.
What we
And
can do for that.
it's, you're preaching to the choir here. This has been my lifelong, oh God, how do we do this? But I've learned as an empath, there are ways, and this goes back to me saying, we cannot do this work without a personal practice, a daily practice to keep ourselves strong, to keep ourselves, and I don't like to use the word protected, because that says, oh, we're keeping something out and locking ourselves in. No, I don't mean that. But there are times when I have to use every practice I know to keep myself in balance. You know, all nature seeks homeostasis, balance. And we need to do that as well. And so that's why I say I couldn't imagine doing the work I do without a daily spiritual practice, you know, connecting to the higher good. In other words, it's like being on an airplane, right? And you're in the terrible turbulence and you're frightened and you're a mess and you're thinking, oh my God, this is awful. I can't, da 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 da. Then you stop that and you think, well, wait a minute. Yes, that's true. Yes, I feel that way. Never deny what you're feeling, but know that above you, there is blue sky and calm and the sun and beauty. And that to me is like the spiritual practice. I am in this insane world, but I know that beyond this insanity is my home, the safe place, the divine, the love, the greater consciousness. And if I don't tune into that, I get sucked in. And when we're sucked in to the anger and the fear, and we get pulled down to that level where we're trying to help, we're not doing any good. We're just becoming part of the problem. So personal practice, meditation, read inspiring material, educate yourself, and have mentors who are really doing good things, and volunteer and smile and be grateful for this life, as wild and insane as it is. And know that you're here to do all the good you can do, and be strong and know you are strong, and know you're good enough.
Mm.
And don't be afraid to speak the voice in your heart and make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
But it's the
Being
voice
noisy,
of your heart.
open-hearted, and noisy. Yeah. Speak up in that way. Those are all beautiful words. Linda, you had mentioned that you had some resources or like stories. Are those on your website? Like
Oh, you mean my database?
your database.
Okay, I have a database. Well, life happens, and I was going to put something out about all these stories, and everyone I have permission to, but so you can put your stories in there. You can tell me your stories, unexplained powers of animals, but I don't have them posted on there.
So you don't have a place right now for people to find those.
To find those stories, I have a place
You're
now,
asking
because
for them.
nobody has this database of stories. So I'm actually still figuring out what I'm gonna do with it. But it's pretty amazing, the stories and the vast array of experiences people have.
Well, give us your website now anyways, in case people want to go there. Is it Dr. Linda Bender?
Yeah, it's let me see. Yes, Linda Bender. I want to make this simple if anybody. Oh, here we are. Yeah. Oh dear. Let me just hold up
Okay.
1 sec. Might be helpful. There we go.
Oh yeah, there is. I was just gonna put that about your book. This is Linda's book, which I have. I should have it right next to me. It's in my closet.
But if you go to lindabender.org.
lindabender.org. I thought it was org. Okay, if someone wants to put that in the chat for me, I appreciate that. lindabender.org, where you can find what Linda is up to in the world. Is there anything you want to say about your charity before we wrap up?
Well, my charity from the heart, what I do is I give money to people who are boots on the ground, that are doing specific work, boots on the ground, that they're not necessarily, making the headlines, but they're people who are out there personally making a difference. And I know those people, and I know the work they're doing, and money isn't going here, there, and everywhere. And so donations all go out, 100% comes in, 100% goes out. Now, the only thing I want to say about that is the post office box. If people want to donate money, they have to contact me, because I just moved and all that stuff changed. So if anybody is so moved to donate to From the Heart, you can email me at, I want to give you an email address I don't usually give out. It's Luna, LUNAPAWS, Luna pause, then the number 7 @gmail.com. So you can contact me, and we can go for there. And I also, like to help advocates, and particularly people who are empathic, because this is who I am, and this is what I have most near and dear to my heart, how we as advocates strengthen ourselves to be the best advocates we can be. And it's all about that heart connection, the strength of the heart. The heart is our strength, not a weakness. So thank you.
That is such a beautiful message to end on. I'll just say that again. I think being open-hearted, being in the heart, being empathic is a strength. It's our superpower. It's not a weakness. It's what gets me out of bed every day, to keep helping the animals, to continue to come from that place of love, because I know we can do better. I know we can evolve, all of us as one.
It's really, really true. And this is the time. This is the time for the empaths. This is our time. This is our time.
Okay. You're getting lots of nice thank yous in the chat, Linda. Everybody has put some nice resources in there. So thank you. Hold on, everybody. Don't go anywhere yet. I'm just going to wrap up with just a few quick announcements. Okay. So the next 2 workshops that we have scheduled are November 22nd, which is next Tuesday. We have pressure campaigns. And on December 6th, which I think also is a Tuesday, or maybe a Thursday, we have vegan kid activists, featuring a panel of 3 amazing vegan kid activists who will talk about themselves and answer questions, and many more workshops to be announced. Please check out our previous workshops on our YouTube channel, as I mentioned. And while you're there, subscribe. Thank you so much for that. I'd also like to announce our 2023 live events. The AAM Washington, D.C. Week of Action is taking place March 14th through 20th, 2023. And the Colorado Convergence is taking place in and around Denver. The dates are June 24th through July 1st, 2023. Plenty of time to plan ahead. No experience is required. Everybody is welcome, but registration is required. There's no cost to attend. You just have to get there. You have to pay to make sure that you can get there. And you'll find the registration and more details on our website and our Facebook page, or you can reach out to me. And if anybody wants to share their IG handles in the chat so we can follow each other that way as well, you're welcome to do that. And I think this has been just a really, really wonderful workshop. We're wrapping up. So thank you, Linda, so much for your time and wisdom.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody who's been here tonight. Thank you all for for being here and the tireless work you're doing and will continue to do for the animals. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or a mentee or want to get involved, please reach out to any AAM mentor or visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. And until next time, everyone, stay strong and live vegan. Thank you, everybody.
Bless you.
Thank you.